All right, let's dive in to our final bit of learning, and that's going to be just a brief look at the Midrash that is at the core of the Magid section. We've done the introductory material. We spent a lot of time with the telling of the story, the four sons, and now we're getting to the interpretation. So just to remind ourselves where this shows up in the Haggadah, Say Ulamad, go out and learn. It's an interesting phrase, doesn't really appear in rabbinic literature so much, but seems to be something that's in the Haggadah. Go out and learn. Ma bikesh Lavan ha'arami lasot liYaakov Avinu. That go and learn what Lavan, the Aramean, and indeed when you say Arami, it seems to in the Torah refer to Lavan. We're going to figure out who he is in just a minute. What he wanted to do to Jacob, our father. Since Pharaoh only decreed the death sentence on the males, but Lavan sought to uproot the entire people, as it says, Arami Oved Avi. So what we're getting here is an interpretation of a verse. The interpretation comes first, and then the verse comes to prove the interpretation. So the verse is Arami Oved Avi, which one possible translation is an Aramean tried to destroy my father. You have to say tried to destroy because obviously Jacob wasn't destroyed by Lavan. But if you're going to read it literally the way they're reading that word Oved, it seems to read even an Aramean destroyed my father. If Oved is a transitive verb, the Arami is Lavan and Avi is Jacob. So that seems to be the force of the Midrash here. This is again the Haggadah's take on this verse. Lavan, the Aramean, tried to kill Jacob, my father. And in that way, he was actually worse than Pharaoh, which is an amazing claim because Pharaoh is pretty bad. We know this also from a Midrash about Miriam making an argument to her father Amram when Pharaoh decreed to kill all the boys. And Miriam said, why did you divorce all the women? You've put a decree on the boys and the girls, no children at all from your action, Amram. So then Amram remarries and has Moshe, according to the Talmud. So maybe there's something going on with the connection of these midrashim. But here, our midrash Haggadah says Lavan is even worse than Pharaoh, which is a striking claim to make on Seder night. Let's try to figure out where this all comes from. Let's go back to the Mishnah and remind ourselves that the Mishnah tells us you begin with gnut, with disgrace or shame, and finish with praise, vidoresh, and then you expound from Arami Oved Avi until you finish the entire selection. And so we were arguing that you could read this two ways. Either it's two instructions, right? Machil begnut misayim b'shvach is one idea. That's the story that you tell. Avadim hayinu, we were slaves, or our ancestors were idol worshippers. That's one story. And then a second activity is to do the drasha, to do the expounding on Arami Oved Avi. You could even read it as one activity, which is to say the drasha of Arami Oved Avi is telling a story of Gnut to Shvach, is telling the story of moving from degradation to praise. And that's one option that we're going to consider today, because there is a certain degradation that comes up with thinking about Lavan trying to kill our father Jacob. So let's just see where this Kol Parashat Kula is, where this appears, this Arami Oved Avi, this set of verses appears in the Torah. It comes in Deuteronomy chapter 26, towards the end of Deuteronomy, and we're describing the scene that, the ritual that happens when you stand in front of the priest and bring your first fruits on Shavuot. We looked at this briefly when we were getting into the degradation to praise flow. And this is what you say before you hand over your first fruits. Arami Oved Avi, my father was a wandering Aramean, or as the Haggadah is reading it, an Aramean, i.e. Lavan, tried to destroy my father. And then we get the rest of the story of going down to Egypt, and we suffered at the hands of Egypt, but God took us out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. That's the story we're familiar with, and indeed the Haggadah goes through the midrashim on those verses. But notice that when the Mishnah says finish the entire parasha, finish the entire section, it means a section in the Torah means until you get to a break, like a paragraph break. And this is not the end. It goes on and says, "V'yivienu al makom hazeh, v'yitein lanu et haaretz hazot, eretz zavar chalav udvash." The story goes on and says that God brought us to this place, a land flowing with milk and honey, and now I I have brought the first fruits of the soil, which you, O Hashem, have given to me. And then the instruction continues, you shall leave it before Hashem your God and bow low before Hashem your God. Again, this is on Shavuot. And you shall enjoy together with the Levite and the stranger in your midst all the bounty that Hashem your God has bestowed upon you and your household. So you could actually have an arc here that ends nicely with, if the Genut was an Aramean tried to destroy my father, maybe the Shabach isn't even arriving at the land, which is of course part of it, but also that you have so much goodness in your house now that you're able to share with others, the Levi and the stranger who are in your midst. I'm opening up my bounty and giving to them. And that maybe that's the praise that we're talking about. And indeed, that's something that in a normal year on Seder night, you would enact, you would share your bounty with the people who were unfortunate in your environs. And that's maybe the end of the parasha, the end of the section that you're meant to go all the way to and arrive at the praise of. Let's just take a little bit of a look at what the interpretive possibilities are for just those three words, Arami Oved Avi. We've been reading it as an Aramean tried to destroy my father. One of the later Midrashim actually brings this out, the problematic of this out explicitly says, and so you find with Lavan Arami Oved Avi, but did he really kill him, right? It says Arami Oved Avi, an Aramean destroyed my father, but did he really, did he really kill him? No, it's just because he thought to kill him, so it was ascribed to him as if he killed him. So you can see the grammatic problem they're dealing with here. If you read it as an Aramean tried to destroy my father, so you have to add in parentheses tried to, because Jacob wasn't destroyed by Lavan, but he thought to destroy him, and there is that scene in Genesis 31 where it seems like Lavan is out to get Jacob, and there are some parallels in language between that scene and the Exodus of Egypt. Now, could you read this another way? Could you read Arami Oved Avi as another instance of Gnut, but nevertheless not involving Lavan the Arami? You could, if you decide that Arami Oved Avi, the Arami, would be Jacob or Abraham, and they were wandering around or sort of destroying themselves, something about intransitive verb Oved, a wandering or a perishing Aramean was my father, and the result of that wandering was to go down to Egypt. You could read it that way, but that takes out the external, suffering that Lavan brings upon us, which the Haggadah at least is interested in comparing to Pharaoh. There's one other way of reading this, which I think is interesting. It's thinking about Lavan not as an external foe like Pharaoh, but actually as an internal relative who nevertheless seeks to destroy me. You remember the family tree from Genesis. So Lavan is the grandson of Abraham's brother, Nahor, and Jacob is the grandson of Abraham. So Lavan and Jacob are actually second cousins. And in that way, Lavan is a member of the family. And this itself might be a statement of shame. That is to say, our family includes a wider swath of people, some of whom were out to destroy other members of our family. This is the Jewish story, right? Jacob's sons tried to destroy Jacob's favorite son, Joseph. And this is not something that's unfamiliar to our family. We'll just look at this last section together. So you're supposed to read the section in Deuteronomy 26. There's two ways you could read it. A person should say his own praise, shivcho, in a soft voice, and say his own shame or disgrace, genuto, in a loud voice. Here you have our two terms from the Mishnah, the genut to shvach, both of them encoded in Deuteronomy 26. One should say his praise in a soft voice is derived from the portion of the declaration of the tithes. That's the next section in this chapter. And one should say in a loud voice that which is his shame, right? Which is derived from the recitation of the first fruits. That's our section. Mikra Bikurim is the section that begins Arami Oved Avi. So what's the genut? So Rashi explains for us, Ugnuto, what's the genut that you have to say in a loud voice because you want to talk about your shame more proudly than you want to talk about your praise. This is Kigon Arami Oved Avi. Hainu Gnuto. The shame of Arami Oved Avi is Mitvadin she'avi and Lavan Arami Hayarasha. We are admitting that Lavan is our father, and he was an evil person. Arami Oved Avi, my father Lavan was a destroying person, was a rasha. And you think about the ways in which, what does it mean for us to take some responsibility inside our own family for some of the persecutions that happened to the Jewish people, even worse than Pharaoh. So I'll leave that as Optional discussion for Seder night. Just want to say how great it was to learn with all of you going into this holiday. Hope that it's meaningful for everybody.